Hi everyone, it's Monica, and welcome back to Tailor-Made Cards for You. Today we're going to create a card using one of the new Inventor stamps by Tim Holtz, and I'm going to be working specifically with the typewriter. Now there are 3 sets of the Inventor stamps, and this is one of them. I also have the steampunk one, which I'll be sharing with you in the future. And then the 3rd set is a pair of scissors and a dress form. Now before I begin, I wanted to create a background that was a little bit more vintage, and this white cardstock just wasn't doing the trick. So I decided to use my mixed media transparent acrylic soft gel paint, and this is the sepia color. And honestly, I came across this product by accident. I think I picked it up at Tuesday morning, and I liked the sepia color. And that's why I picked it up. But what I really like about it is that it's transparent. And when you move your tool around to spread it, it creates kind of a leather effect when it dries, and it keeps all of those little lines and brush strokes when you're working with it. Now you can easily smooth it out as well, but I like the texture. So this was a really great find, and I'll be sure to link it up for you at the end of the video as well. The brush that I'm working with is from Finnabar, and it is a silicone brush. And what's different about this brush is it doesn't have any of the bristles. It's just pure silicone, which is somewhat of a rubber texture. And I'm able to spread the paint without having any of the brush strokes. And you can easily move the paint with this silicone brush. It comes in a couple of sizes, and I have the bigger size, but I'm probably going to be investing in the smaller one as well because it's something that I seem to be using regularly with some of my mixed media projects. So I did use my heating tool to dry the paint because I wanted to move on to my ink. But as you can see some of that texture by just using the paint. So I decided to add some distress ink, and the colors that I'm using are the antique linen and the vintage photo. And again, I was just looking to add a little bit of distress and aging to my paper because I just thought it was a little bit too white. So after I was finished adding the antique linen and the vintage photo, I still wanted to add a little bit more interest to the background. So I went ahead and took those 2 inks and rubbed them onto my craft mat and spritzed them. And then I'm just using the simple technique of picking up the paint by dipping my cardstock into the wet droplets of water. And this just creates a little bit more interest for my background. So once I was finished adding the water droplets with the ink, I went ahead and I used my heating tool to dry off my cardstock so I could start stamping. Now, as I indicated in the beginning, there are 3 sets of the Inventor stamp sets, and I have number 1. And the first stamp set has the typewriter along with the clock. Now, I decided to work with the typewriter today because I love vintage typewriters. And if you've seen some of my videos in the past, you know that I have a antique Royal vintage typewriter, and I love it. It's great to create sentiments for, and it gives me a lot of inspiration. But before I stamped the typewriter stamp onto my cardstock, I wanted to create some background. So I went ahead and grabbed one of my sets that has some type letters. And the set that I'm using is from My Favorite Things, and it's called Typewriter Text. So as you can see, this is an oversized stamp, but it works great for backgrounds. And I am using my stamping platform from the Tim Holtz collection because I want to make sure that my letters do come out nice and crisp. Alright, so once I was happy with my background, it was time to move on to my typewriter. Now this stamp is very detailed and it's beautiful. Stampers Anonymous did a really nice job of it. It has lots of detail to the stamp, and when you stamp the image, the little words come out nice and crisp. Now one thing that you might be thinking is, how am I possibly going to see the detail in this stamp since I went ahead and I stamped a somewhat detailed background? You can see a lot of those letters that come through from my original background stamp, which might impact seeing some of the detail on the stamp. But I do have a trick for that, and I'm going to be showing you that in just a moment here. Now there's a couple of ways that I could have solved this. I could have easily stamped my background in a lighter color, like maybe gray, but I really wanted to stick with the black tone. So what I decided to do is to use some embossing powder on my typewriter, which will make the ink a little bit more distinct, and it'll make it stand up and it'll rise a little bit more away from the background. And that's how you'll be able to see the separation of the two. Now the embossing powder that I am using is clear, and I prefer using clear embossing powder versus some of the color embossing powder, because then I can just switch my color of ink. Now I do have some colored embossing powder that I use occasionally, but again, I just prefer the clear, and then I'll just switch out the color of ink that I'm using, and then the embossing powder will pick up the color tone of the ink. So you can see as I begin to use my heating tool how the typewriter becomes really nice and crisp. And that's because, again, I am using embossing powder, which will make the image rise a little bit more, and it does have that plastic that's melting, which will give it a little bit more shine. So once I was finished with my heat embossing, I did decide to add a little bit more interest to my background. And this is where I brought out some of that clear tissue paper. Now this tissue paper is from Tim Holtz, but it is a really old set, and I don't even think you can get it anymore. I will look for it when I go to link up all of the products, but this is something I've had in my stash for a while. But it is great because it has some typeset words, and it really matched my theme. Now for my sides, I also used some Tim Holtz washi tape, which just gave it a little bit more contrast. Now there was a third piece of, or a third roll of the washi tape that I used, and it is also from the Tim Holtz collection, but it's actually from the Christmas collection, and you're going to see what I'm talking about here in just a minute. But I really liked this washi tape because it had the vintage type on it. So instead of using the strips where it would show all of the words, I decided to just tear it a bit and use it as an accent, and I think it worked. I'm definitely going to be using the typewriter set along with this washi tape when I start creating my Christmas cards, because it works really well together. But I just wanted to add a little bit of the accent, and I think by ripping it and tearing it and not showing the complete words, it really did work. It's really nice to be able to stretch our supplies, especially our holiday supplies in the off season. I know during the holidays we're using our Christmas supplies constantly, and then once the holiday passes, we just put those away. So it's really nice to be able to pull those out in the beginning of the year or even mid-year and be able to use them on our projects. So once I was finished adding my washing tape, I did decide to add some stitching from my sewing machine. And whenever I'm creating layered cards, I really like to use my sewing machine because it will help to hold the papers in place. All right, so now that my focal point was stamped and I was happy with the background, it was time to add a little bit more interest. And this is where I pulled out another stamp set that just had some miscellaneous images. And this stamp set is probably one of my favorite stamp sets. You've seen me use it before, and it's the Etcetera stamp set from Stampers Anonymous. And as you can see, I'm just using part of the stamp to just create a little bit more interest on my background. A lot of times we forget that we don't have to necessarily use the entire stamp on our image or on our design. We can just take bits and pieces from the stamp and use it where it would make the most sense on our design. And as this one you can see here, I'm just using parts of it on the edge just to create a little bit more interest. Now another stamp that's from the same stamp set is this 15-cent piece. And I use this stamp constantly. I have to really say that I've gotten my money's worth out of this Etcetera stamp set because it is one that I've used all the time. It has some great sentiments along with some backgrounds, and it just creates some nice interest. But this 15-cent stamp is something that I've used on my background. I don't mind too much covering it because, again, it's just an accent and it works really well. And then finally, I am taking this circle here that says documentation, I believe, and it's, again, just another piece for my background. Okay, and then finally, the idea that I had for this card was to actually add the Inventor. Now, I know my stamp set is called the Inventor sets, so I thought it would be fun to add a little Inventor to my card as well. Now, this image is from a stamp set called Time Travelers, and I thought he was the perfect image. And to me, he looks like an inventor. He has his little pocket watch, and he is an old vintage man. So he looks like somebody that would be an inventor in the olden times. So I thought he would be a great addition to my card. Now, one thing that I would change if I were to go back and create this card again is I think I probably would have stamped my time traveler gentleman on just some plain white cardstock, and then I would have probably colored him up. I thought the brown on brown tone was just a little bit too much. And again, hindsight is 2020. So if I were to create this card again, I probably would create a little bit more contrast. But I did add embossing powder to my stamped image, and then I heat embossed it so that the time traveler image would at least pop out a little bit. And then I fussy cut it to add it to the top of my card. All right, so another detail that I use on my card were some printables from Victoria Design. And this is the type set printable, and it comes in a variety of circle sizes. And I believe I'm using the smallest circle for my sentiment. I've used Victoria Designs on several of my projects in the past, so I'll make sure that I link up to her shop. She has some great vintage images, and I get a lot of use out of her product. All right, so for this particular card, I did want to create sort of what of an inventor theme. So the sentiment that I'm using is Inventor. And again, I just used some of those printables from Victoria Designs, and then I cut out the circle and I added the word Inventor using some Tombow liquid glue. All right, and then to adhere my traveler, I did use some foam tape just to have them have a little bit more dimension. Now, one thing that I did do after the fact is I did go back and add some glossy accents to my Inventor labels because I just wanted them to have a little bit more shine, and that really made them pop just a little bit more. Now, as I indicated earlier, I thought that the end result of this card was just a little bit too brown. And don't get me wrong, I love vintage, but I think it needed a little bit more contrast. So I did create a second card that's a little bit brighter, and I will have a picture of that at the end of the video. So leave me a comment and let me know which card you prefer. Do you prefer the vintage one, or do you prefer the bright one? I'm just curious to know what your preference is. So as always, I'll leave a list of all the products that I've used to create the cards along with the links to the stores. Now, if you've enjoyed my video, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. And again, don't forget to leave me a comment. Let me know which card you prefer. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, don't forget to hit that subscribe button before you head out. I do plan on doing a couple more videos using these Inventor stamps. Like I said, I have the light bulb stamp along with the clock and the steampunk, so I'm going to do some videos with those as well. All right, everybody, thanks so much for stopping by, and we'll see you again next time.